As trade tensions continue to simmer between the United States and China, both nations are currently engaged in critical discussions aimed at easing the friction that has characterized their economic relationship in recent years. The latest round of trade talks, which resumed on June 10, 2025 in London, follows a positive call between President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, setting the stage for potential breakthroughs on contentious issues like tariffs and rare earth exports. The first day of negotiations reportedly lasted 6 hours, with U.S. officials expressing cautious optimism about the outcomes. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent described the meeting as good, while Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick referred to the discussions as fruitful. President Trump, reflecting this sentiment of his team, noted that he had received good reports from the talks but acknowledged the complexity of negotiating with China, remarking, "China's not easy." The backdrop to these discussions is a recent escalation in trade disputes, highlighted by accusations from both sides of breaching a truce that was agreed upon in mid-May in Geneva. The U.S. has tightened its control over exports of key materials, including ethane, a gas critical for plastic manufacturing, while China has imposed restrictions on rare earth minerals, which are essential for various technologies, including electric vehicles and electronics. The stakes are high not just for the two nations but for the global economy as well. The World Bank recently revised its global growth forecast down to 2.3%, citing high tariffs and trade uncertainty as significant headwinds affecting nearly all economies. Indermit Gill, the World Bank's chief economist, suggested that resolving current trade disputes could positively impact global growth by as much as 0.2 percentage points over the next 2 years. In the context of these negotiations, the automotive sector is particularly anxious. Reports indicate that Chinese restrictions on rare earth minerals have already begun to impact production, forcing companies like India's Maruti Suzuki to cut electric vehicle production targets by 2/3 due to supply shortages. Meanwhile, U.S. auto manufacturers are feeling the pressure as they rely on these critical materials for their vehicles. As the trade talks proceed, the potential for new tariffs looms large. Trump has already doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum, initiating a broad wave of cost increases across various sectors. Economists project that these tariffs could elevate U.S. import costs by over $100 billion, with repercussions felt across industries from automotive to consumer goods. While U.S. officials are hopeful for a handshake agreement on key issues such as rare earth exports, the Chinese delegation led by Vice Premier He Lifeng has remained comparatively reticent, offering no public comments on the progress of the talks. Analysts note that both sides are likely to leverage their respective strengths, China with its control over rare earths and the U.S. with its dominance in certain energy resources, as they navigate these complex discussions. The outcome of these talks remains uncertain, and investors are closely monitoring developments. European markets showed slight gains in anticipation of positive announcements regarding the U.S.-China negotiations, with sectors such as autos and energy gaining traction based on the hope that a resolution could pave the way for a more stable trade environment. As the discussions unfold, the global economic landscape remains at a critical juncture. With the deadline for Trump's self-imposed pause on reciprocal tariffs approaching in early July, the urgency for both sides to reach a consensus is palpable. Moving forward, the implications of these negotiations will be felt not only in the U.S. and China but across the globe as businesses and economies react to the changing dynamics of international trade. In the rapidly evolving landscape of global trade, China's consumption dilemma has taken center stage, particularly in the context of its strained relationship with the United States under President Trump. As trade disputes have escalated, the need for China to pivot away from its traditional reliance on exports and investment toward boosting domestic consumption has become increasingly urgent. However, this shift is not merely a matter of policy adjustment, it requires a profound societal transformation encompassing fiscal reform, structural economic changes, and a cultural evolution in consumer behavior. China's economic structure has long been criticized for its low domestic consumption levels. Despite numerous government stimulus packages, the desired expansion in household spending has remained elusive. A notable example is the 12 trillion yuan, approximately $1.65 trillion economic stimulus announced in September 2024. While the package aimed to tackle off-balance sheet debt, it fell short in stimulating real economic recovery, particularly in household consumption. Official figures indicate that local government debt has nearly doubled since 2019, rising from 21.3 trillion yuan to 40.7 trillion yuan by the end of 2023, suggesting an unsustainable reliance on debt-driven growth. Experts argue that if the Chinese government is serious about expanding consumption, it must reassess the effectiveness of current stimulus measures, which largely favor supply-side activity over consumer confidence. The government has taken steps to recapitalize major state banks but has only marginally raised the monthly minimum pension, leaving consumer sentiment tepid amid high youth unemployment and a cautious approach to spending. Adding to the complexity, a recent austerity campaign launched in March 2025 has further dampened consumption. By curtailing government-related spending on luxury items and lavish events, the campaign not only reflects a desire to curb bureaucratic excess but also has a chilling effect on the service sector. Historical data from previous austerity measures indicate that such campaigns lead to significant declines in sales across high-end restaurants and luxury goods, with up to 3 million restaurant closures reported in 2024 alone. Compounding these issues, China is grappling with persistent deflation, which has left its economy vulnerable. The government's recent adjustments to the Consumer Price Index (CPI) target, now set at 2%, signal a troubling acceptance of low inflation. The Producer Price Index (PPI) has also experienced a prolonged decline, marking the 30th consecutive month of negative growth as of March 2025. This deflationary cycle not only erodes profitability for industrial firms but also exacerbates unemployment, particularly among younger demographics. As the urban jobless rate for 16 to 24-year-olds soared to 16.5% in March 2025, the economic ramifications are evident. The broader implications for consumer spending are significant, as high unemployment rates lead to heightened precautionary savings, further stifling demand. The total number of individuals categorized as dishonest debtors has surged, reflecting an alarming trend of rising insolvency amid an economic downturn. To address these systemic issues, experts advocate for a comprehensive overhaul of China's fiscal and monetary policies. Key reforms could include tax restructuring to enhance public revenues, increased borrowing for social investment, and a re-evaluation of the governance of state-owned enterprises (SOEs) to promote equitable wealth distribution. Moreover, incentivizing higher wages, supporting unionization, and expanding public services such as healthcare and education could help alleviate economic insecurity and stimulate consumer spending. As the world looks on, the trajectory of China's domestic consumption will be crucial not only for the country itself but for the global economy at large. The success of these reforms will depend on the ability of Chinese policymakers to implement a coordinated and multidimensional approach that prioritizes inclusive growth. With strategic foresight and robust policy action, there lies an opportunity for China to cultivate a resilient consumption-driven economy, fostering long-term stability and prosperity in an increasingly interconnected world. In a stark reflection of the shifting global economic landscape, the World Bank has significantly downgraded its growth forecast for 2025, attributing the reduction to escalating trade tensions and the impact of high tariffs. This move underscores the mounting concerns about the implications of ongoing trade wars, particularly between the United States and China, which have heightened volatility in financial markets and disrupted supply chains worldwide. On June 10, 2025, the World Bank announced a cut of 0.4 percentage points from its previous forecast, now projecting global growth at a mere 2.3%. The institution cited significant headwinds from heightened tariffs and the resulting uncertainty as major factors contributing to this downturn. Such a slowdown poses risks not only to national economies but also to the global recovery trajectory in the post-pandemic era. The backdrop of this development is the ongoing trade negotiations between the US and China, which have reached a critical juncture.
Following a tense escalation of tariffs, where President Trump imposed a staggering 145% tariff on Chinese goods, and China retaliated with 125% tariffs on U.S. products, the two nations have begun to engage in dialogue aimed at de-escalating tensions. Notably, these discussions are occurring against the backdrop of fears that a prolonged trade war might trigger a global recession. President Trump's approach has been characterized by a strategy of assertive negotiations which many observers argue has put China in a precarious position. As the Chinese economy shows signs of stagnation, analysts speculate that the Trump administration believes this could lead to a favorable negotiation outcome for the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent expressed optimism about the ongoing talks, indicating they have been fruitful, while Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick echoed this sentiment, describing the discussions as good meetings. However, the road ahead remains fraught with challenges. The Chinese government's official GDP growth rates have come under scrutiny, with independent economists suggesting that actual growth may be significantly lower than the 5% touted by Beijing. The debate over the validity of these economic figures adds an additional layer of complexity to the negotiations. The perception of an economically vulnerable China may have emboldened U.S. officials. However, the reality on the ground could be more complicated, as evidenced by recent reports indicating that China's economic data may not fully capture the structural weaknesses present in its economy. In a recent twist, the newly appointed Chinese trade negotiator Li Chenggang indicated a willingness to reach an agreement, swiftly surprising many experts who believed a more obstinate stance was likely. The urgency of the situation is further amplified by the stakes involved, particularly in the realm of rare earth minerals, which are crucial for a multitude of high-tech products and have become a primary bargaining chip in the trade negotiations. The situation is further complicated by the fact that both nations are employing their control over critical raw materials as leverage in their negotiations. The U.S. has tightened restrictions on the export of various essential materials to China, while Beijing has implemented export curbs on rare earth minerals vital for American manufacturing and defense sectors. This escalating tit-for-tat has led to significant disruptions in various industries, from automotive production to high-tech manufacturing. As these discussions unfold, the global economic landscape hangs in the balance. The World Bank's grim growth forecast serves as a warning signal, emphasizing the potential long-term ramifications of unresolved trade disputes. The outcome of the current negotiations between the U.S. and China will likely shape not only bilateral relations but also the broader economic environment in which countries operate. Looking ahead, the future of global trade remains uncertain. As negotiations continue, the international community will be closely monitoring developments with the hope that a resolution can be reached before the expiration of temporary trade agreements. The dynamics of U.S.-China relations, particularly in light of the ongoing economic pressures, will undoubtedly influence the trajectory of global economic growth for years to come. In a notable expression of international solidarity, Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun recently reaffirmed Beijing's commitment to support South Africa in the face of perceived hegemony and bullying, particularly amid escalating tensions with the United States. His remarks came during a meeting in Beijing with General Rudzani Mafwanya, the chief of the South African National Defence Force. This encounter takes place against a backdrop of increasing friction between Pretoria and Washington, fueled by South Africa's growing ties with Russia and the U.S.'s controversial asylum policies. Dong emphasized the historical bond between China and South Africa, rooted in China's support for the African National Congress during the apartheid era. China and South Africa forged a special bond of comradeship and brotherhood through historical struggles, he stated, underscoring the two nations' mutual commitment to uphold true multilateralism and jointly oppose hegemonic practices in power politics. This statement reflects not only a desire for deeper bilateral cooperation but also China's broader strategic aim to promote its global security initiative, which advocates for dialogue and partnership over confrontation. As tensions between the U.S. and China continue to rise, Beijing is positioning itself as a counterbalance to U.S. influence in Africa and beyond.
The timing of Dong's comments is particularly significant following Washington's recent decision to fast-track asylum for 59 white Afrikaners in response to concerns over South Africa's political climate and its relations with Russia.
This move has drawn sharp criticism from Pretoria, which views it as an infringement on its sovereignty and an attempt to undermine its government. Such actions have prompted South Africa to seek closer ties with nations like China, which presents itself as an ally against Western dominance.
The implications of this partnership extend beyond mere diplomatic gestures. They highlight a shift in global alignments amid an increasingly multipolar world. As countries like China and Russia bolster their defense and economic ties, the U.S. faces the challenge of maintaining its influence in regions that are historically viewed as its sphere of interest. In parallel discussions, the broader context of U.S.-China relations is further complicated by ongoing trade negotiations where rare earth minerals have emerged as a pivotal issue. China, which controls approximately 70% of the global supply of these critical materials, is leveraging its dominance as negotiations unfold. The U.S. has become increasingly reliant on these minerals essential for high-tech industries and military applications, creating a scenario where China's export controls could significantly disrupt American manufacturing and technological development. As trade talks progress, U.S. officials are reportedly seeking assurances regarding the flow of rare earth materials, a matter underscored by recent export restrictions imposed by China. Analysts suggest that while China may be open to dialogue, the likelihood of completely lifting restrictions remains slim as it seeks to maintain strategic leverage. This complex interplay of defense cooperation, trade negotiations, and geopolitical maneuvering underscores the shifting dynamics in global politics. With China positioning itself as a key ally for countries like South Africa, the future may see a reconfiguration of international alliances that could redefine power structures globally. As we look ahead, the potential for increased collaboration between nations resisting U.S. hegemony may reshape the landscape of international relations. The coming months will be crucial in determining how these dynamics unfold. As both China and the U.S. navigate their respective strategies in an increasingly contested global arena. In a significant diplomatic overture, Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged South Korea's newly elected leader Lee Jae-myung to steer bilateral relations onto the right course. This call, made shortly after Lee's inauguration on June 4, 2025, marks a pivotal moment for China-South Korea ties, which have been strained in recent years due to geopolitical tensions and domestic political shifts within South Korea. In a phone conversation on Tuesday, she emphasized the importance of mutual respect for each other's core interests and major concerns, stating that such respect is essential for maintaining a healthy and stable relationship. A good neighborly friendship and increased economic, cultural, and diplomatic exchanges were highlighted as key components for both nations to navigate the turbulent waters of current international relations. She remarked a healthy, stable, and continuously deepening China-South Korea relationship aligns with the trends of the times, serves the fundamental interests of both peoples, and contributes to regional and global peace, stability, and prosperity. Lee, who campaigned on a platform of improving ties with Beijing, echoed Xi's sentiments by acknowledging the close geographical and cultural connections between the two nations. He expressed a commitment to enhancing mutual goodwill and fostering deeper cooperation in various fields, including trade and cultural exchanges. Analysts suggest that Lee's approach signifies a departure from the more confrontational stance of his predecessor Yoon Suk-yeol, who had prioritized alignment with the United States amidst rising tensions with China. The backdrop to this diplomatic engagement is marked by China's desire to strengthen its influence in the region as it faces an increasing rivalry with the U.S. Xi's call for improved relations comes at a time when South Korea's economic interests are intricately tied to China, its largest trading partner. Despite the potential for enhanced cooperation, experts caution that internal political dynamics and external pressures, particularly from the U.S., may complicate the trajectory of China-South Korea relations. Lu Chao, a Korean peninsula expert, noted that the conversation between Xi and Lee serves as a positive signal for mending ties. particularly after the deterioration experienced during Yoon's administration over contentious issues such as Taiwan and the South China Sea. He emphasized that fostering a stable relationship is vital for regional stability and mutual benefit, suggesting that both nations should strive for a cooperative approach to navigate sensitive topics. Looking ahead, the implications of this dialogue are significant. The potential for a pragmatic foreign policy under Lee could lead to a recalibration of South Korea's international relations, balancing commitments to the U.S. with the need to maintain robust ties with China. Analysts predict that Lee's administration will need to navigate domestic political challenges, including strong conservative opposition and public sentiment shaped by past administrations, as it seeks to redefine South Korea's position in the geopolitical landscape. As the international community watches closely, the evolution of China-South Korea relations under Lee's leadership could set important precedents for regional diplomacy in East Asia. The upcoming months will be crucial in determining whether this initial engagement can translate into sustained cooperation and stability amidst the complex interplay of global power dynamics.